You never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. You never know if you don't roll them dice. You better roll them dice. You never know if it'll change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right.
All right, I've got a solid waveform on my end.
Solid waveform here.
All right, all ready to initiate drift. Starting neural handshake, bringing up optimal Chrome tabs. Okay. Hello, I'm Matt.
And I'm Rob.
Welcome to Dungeon Master of None.
This is a casual Dungeons & Dragons podcast for dungeon masters and players alike, where we talk about all sorts of things that you might be interested with the intent of getting you excited about and inspired to play Dungeons & Dragons, and hopefully giving you some of the tools that you need to do so.
Yes, and to illustrate the casualness, I've just opened a beer.
That's right, Matt has just opened a beer.
So
because
there's a lot going
we
on.
are a cool, chill, relaxed podcast.
We're not like your parents' Dungeons & Dragons podcast.
Late night with Matt and Rob. Getting chill in the evening. All right, Matt had something he wanted to talk about.
Yeah, so we'll do an alternative. We have an alternative recording that goes out live for the morning commute.
That's right, we got the zoo crew for the morning. And
it's a little raunchy.
A little more relaxing, smooth jazz feeling for the evening time.
Anyway, we're talking about just what's going on this week, what we've been reading, what's in the news, and 3-alarm fire siren in the realms of RPG adjacent things is Amazon bad boy Jeff Bezos.
Yeah, up and comer.
Yes,
new lightweight Amazon.
Newly fit, newly CrossFit adapter Jeff Bezos have spent like $250 million or something to buy the rights for a Lord of the Rings TV show.
And this is of special concern to both Matt and I, because because we are Lord of the Rings.
In fear.
We are Lord of the Rings hyper nerds. Matt, did you take a class or write a
I did
paper on
an
it?
independent study with a medievalist in the English department who had written a book on Tolkien at my university, and so I did some research. I read some Geoffrey of Monmouth. I had to write a paper on Lord of the Rings once.
So Matt and I have both read not just Lord of the Rings and its appendices and the Silmarillion, but also the Lost Tales and all of the other various errata. I've even read J.R.
all the bullshit
Tolkien's...
Christopher Tolkien is dragging around. Oh, so the cool thing about hanging out with this professor who is a Tolkien scholar is like going into the archives and stuff. She had learned like the fact that Tolkien has a grandson, so one of Christopher Tolkien's son, who's just like a complete fuck up and a shame to the family, like really into drugs, and he just like chews through their estate's money. So I don't know, that was nice to know.
That was interesting to know. I didn't know that. Is this the person who's going to take over when Christopher dies? Because
Christopher doesn't have much time left.
years old.
Yeah. Oh man.
We are really getting off in the weeds, though. So let's
anyway, we're going to talk about the TV show.
We're going to talk about the TV show. So, Matt, you have some opinions about this.
Yeah, well, okay, my initial reaction to this is the buzz around it seems like we're basically making this because Game of Thrones has made HBO just a shitload of money, and without putting any new effort into, like, developing a property or finding another series of novels and a talented team of screenwriters to adapt them, we're just going to take something we know that works that's in the general same vein. So that seems to be the like business strategy. I'm not on the inside, but from the outside, that's what it looks like exactly.
Cynically,
copy paste.
It does seem like a very shallow attempt to cash in on the success of Game of Thrones by adapting a successful and popular intellectual property and basically doing for it what Game of Thrones has done.
What makes me worried about that is everything that makes Game of Thrones good, the fact that it subverts stereotypes and genres, it has lots of sex and violence, are not really things that Lord of the Rings does at all.
Well, Martin wrote
right?
Game of Thrones as a response or as a deliberate subversion to Lord of the Rings. Not as like an attack, but he was saying, well, we've had 40 years or whatever of,
fantasy doing the same shit over
fantasy doing high fantasy and elves, and he said, what if we write a fantasy without elves, with sex and violence, and where the common people sort of matter a little, just a little bit more.
A tiny bit
more. Which is not to say that there isn't space in the fantasy realm for both of them. In fact, there absolutely is. But if the showrunners for Amazon are hoping to capture some of the enthusiasm that Game of Thrones has by including more elf tits than Tolkien would have, then that's, I think, gonna be a problem, because it's gonna not work. It's going to upset fans who I would rate Tolkien fans as second only to gamers in their savagery for attacking what they see as assaults on their canon or on their beloved property.
But that's, I think, the thing about Tolkien fans is, like, they matter less than, like, a Star Wars or Star Trek fan who's upset about what they're doing to their franchise just because there's less of them. You actually have to read a book.
That's actually a great point, and I have lamented to Matt and to others the rapid debasement of the value of Tolkien canon over recent years. There was a time that if you wanted to develop a Tolkien property, and there have been many games and books and movies, but all of them were based at least in intent on an established text. But then came Shadow of Mordor. And Matt, I don't think you have played Shadow of Mordor.
I watched a roommate play it. I had to leave the room.
It's a very fun game. Very exciting, lots of violence, good controls, but it absolutely abuses the Tolkien lore. It gives Gollum a weird side quest and makes Celebrimbor, who is an elf smith, into some sort of weird wraith that merges with a Númenórean Gondor ranger, who I think is in the wrong era, but I can never figure out like what exactly the year is. And then in the second one, they have dragons and a Balrog. We know exactly where every Sorry, I'm getting carried away. Anyway, the point is, we know where every Balrog is. He fights a Balrog
my favorite
in a frozen
thing of
lake.
this news story coming out was I got to correct a friend in public when he said Celebrimbor or something when he was talking about Shadow over Mordor. I'm like, I'm sorry, it's Celebrimbor.
Oh, good, I said it right. I'm glad.
They're hard seas. Think Latin. Cicero. Anyway, so okay, that's all the negative stuff. I think we can say for certain that the Lord of the Rings trilogy, maybe not the extended editions, but the Lord of the Rings trilogy, it was good cinema at a certain level, and it told a really compelling fantasy story. It was well acted. It was incredibly produced.
I'm willing to go much further than Matt. I think it's the best possible adaptation that we could have gotten. It wasn't
right. You're never going to get anything better.
It wasn't perfect, but I do not think that you could have done better. How could you beat a better casting for Aragorn than Viggo Mortensen?
Or Gandalf?
Or Gandalf as Ian McKellen. How could you possibly beat John Rhys Davies as Gimli?
Despite the fact that he's a huge shithead,
even though he's an asshole, he was perfect for the role. I'll even give Orlando Bloom, a dead ringer for Legolas. It was impossible.
So those were good.
Yeah.
The Hobbit movies looked pretty. They were absolutely horrendous to watch.
I have absolutely no desire to talk about the Hobbit movies. They're terrible.
I watched the last one on a plane. As a person who went to like every midnight premiere of the original ones, I watched the last one on a plane.
I still haven't seen it. About it. And I'm also somebody who went to every premiere for the originals.
Maybe we went to some of those together.
I think we went to some of them together, yeah. Anyway.
So there can be good Lord of the Rings things. There could be bad ones. I think based on what they're saying, all of the things they want to do take place before Lord of the Rings, sort of conceding that, yes, Lord of the Rings is the end of the story. So one, I think there's some good things they could mine in the Tolkien canon. There are some bad things. Two, I find prequels generally disinteresting. Like, let's take Star Wars, for example. There's always going to be more fodder for telling interesting tales when you go into the future and build on your stories. Just going to put that.
I agree. There is a rich body of work to draw from if they're choosing to do so. So there's there's the fall of Moria, not too long before the events of Lord of the Rings.
So I think that's definitely on the top of my list. I would also say a Young Aragorn series.
Young Aragorn is
so
a
it's
strong
established
contender.
He travels all around the world. We don't even know all where, right? As like Thronagil or something like that.
That's right.
Under a pseudonym and like has adventures, right? That could be great.
There's also some limited information about what Gandalf does in between The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings that, if you take some liberties, could be very interesting. Some, working against the return of Sauron. The thing is, there's rich possibilities. I just don't know that that's what Amazon is going to do. I worry that they're going to try to create original
I think it's
fiction.
going straight to either original fiction, which I just can't find any interest in.
It's fine. It's just not, why not adapt a different property if you're going to just make stuff
if
up?
you're going to do original fiction, give yourself the space to do better things.
Right.
So that's one option. I think the more likely option is they go for the I can barely even say it, the Silmarillion.
Oh, that's unfortunate. There are good stories in the Silmarillion, but if they try to adapt the whole thing, it will be a trash fire. And I just don't know how you can tell the story. Just
see on the surface, right? The tales in the Silmarillion and unfinished tales look like maybe Game of Thrones. You've got complicated families, you got backstabbing, you've got all this stuff. On the surface, they look like that. But if you delve deeper, it's basically like reading Greek mythology or Norse mythology or an epic
it's modeled
Sigurd
after
in the Rings.
Eddas, and it wasn't intended to be interesting. Tolkien, as far as I know, never wanted it published. Is that right? Or
I mean, it was published by Christopher Tolkien.
That's right.
I'm not sure whether he wanted it published or not, but
remember.
It was posthumously published. Anyway, so like there's stories where the characters are like monolithic, versions of some kind of fantasy or mythological archetype.
And
that's not very interesting.
The elves of the Silmarillion are the early elves are the Noldor or split mountains in half with their blades type powerful. It's really hard to express that without. I mean, it would look like
human relatable drama.
It would look like an anime, which could be fun if anybody wanted to adapt a hilarious anime, where elves fly through the air and chop giant things in half. I'm okay with that, but I don't think that's how Amazon is going to approach this. I did want to bring one thing up, Matt, and it is it is a possibility for encouragement, a reason to maybe think things won't be so bad. Did you see the adaptation of The Man in the High Castle?
I saw most of it. I saw, I think, the first 7 episodes, and then I didn't personally have Amazon Prime anymore, so I stopped.
That's kind of as good as it got. I did think I watched all of it, but I don't remember a whole lot of what happens. So this isn't a resounding endorsement, but I did think that Amazon's treatment of The Man in the High Castle was relatively, I don't want to say good, that's not the right word, but they tried to do their best to adhere to Philip K. Dick's vision. They did a bad job because he wrote that book with the Tao Te Ching, and it's really hard to make that work in any sort of comprehensible way. But I think that they tried to stay true to the themes that he was working toward. So maybe if we trust them to do that, that they'll do something of the same with Lord of the Rings.
I mean, I think the best we can hope for, and I think this might have been your idea, is that they do an American horror story, different plot every season about interesting characters or interesting times. Like an Aragorn plot about his travels as a young man, a Legolas and Gimli buddy comedy about their further adventures afterwards, something like that, right?
That actually wasn't my idea, but that would be a great idea. And that has infinite potential. So hopefully that they decide to do something like that. But we'll keep an eye on it. But
we'll be keeping all our eyes on it. How can we not?
Let the record state that Matt and I are both extremely skeptical, that I at least have no willpower and I'm going to watch it no matter what.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm not one of these people who's like, oh, I'm not going to watch it. Of course I'm going to watch it.
I try to be principled when there are obvious cash grabs, but there are limits to my strength.
May it be an evening star shines down upon you. May it be when darkness falls.
All right, so we wanted to do one more thing on our little short evening chill, relax session version of Dungeon Master of None, and that was just to talk a little bit about character creation. We didn't want to devote a whole session to this because we're focusing on 5th edition, and 5th edition is not Pathfinder. It should not take you more than half an hour if you're focusing, if you know what you want to do to create your character, and that's a good thing.
When you've got your players together, you can have them throw together a character, I mean, even if they're good at it, in under 10 minutes. Now, what we wanted to talk about is less the rules for making characters, but more of how do you make interesting characters, and how do you help your players make interesting characters quickly?
Right. The important thing for your players and for you is to make sure that they have an idea of what their character wants to be like. And the problem is that a lot of players, especially new players, will come in and they will have a mechanical idea of what they want their character to be. They'll say, I am an elf who fights with 2 swords. In fact, there's a non-zero chance that every single one of you will have a player exactly like that in your first game. But that's not a character concept. That is a mechanical expression of your character. And
right.
That's
good.
A
thing you have, right? Han Solo has a sidearm laser gun and a flying spaceship, but that's not his character, right?
Right.
His character is the mercenary, the smuggler with a heart of gold, right?
Right. And this isn't a fault of the players.
You've got to get that concept to your players.
They'll look at the book and get overwhelmed by the mechanical options and forget to come with, an idea of what they want to be.
And so 5th edition, to its credit, right, when you use the core rulebook to make a character, you choose a race, you choose some type of gender identity or not, you choose a class, right, a thing that shows you how you interact with the world, and you can choose a background, right, so you're an aristocrat, you're a hermit, you're a street orphan, but again, even those things, even the backgrounds are not actually a character, right? Because what makes a character is their motivations, the way they see the world, the way they approach a problem, what they want to accomplish, and that kind of thing, how they act. It's the same as in a film or a movie or a play.
So a great way to approach this is to come to the table, or to encourage your players to come to the table with a model in mind. They don't have to be writers, right? They don't have to have like an essay written of who their character is and where they came from and what they love and what's in their heart of hearts. That's too much to ask. But have them have an idea of what they want their character to be. And there are a number of ways to go about this. Matt has a couple of good ones.
So to introduce DM Matt's authoritative guide of tiers of character development. So on the base tier, what everyone has to have mandated by the game rules, we'll call this tier 0, level 0. You have a character which is just a set of combinations of things, right? It's a set of gear, 2 swords. It's a race, elf. It's a class, ranger, right? That's the minimum you have. That's hardly a character. Tier 1, moving up a level, I would say is a stereotype, right? This is broad stereotypes from fiction and fantasy. For example, whenever you see a movie or something, what's your favorite character type that you identify with, Rob?
My favorite character type is always I guess I identify strongly with the quirky or snarky sidekick. I'm always a big fan of the the brainy one with a little bit of extra pizzazz. I'm trying to come up with a great example off the top of my head, and I'm thinking the only thing that keeps coming to my mind is the guy from the horrible Tom Cruise The Mummy movie. He has an undead sidekick, and the only reason I'm thinking that is because I saw it recently and I wasn't prepared for your question. But
well, no, that's okay. So I think how to get Buffy. Players from
I figured it out. Xander.
Xander. You want to be the boring guy who has no powers or abilities.
Exactly. It's always my favorite.
But is in the background.
Got to make do.
Making quips, cracking wise. All right.
Having side adventures.
So, and I think this is how you get your players from tier 0, which is just stats and maybe names of races and classes, to tier 1. You say to them, when you watch movies or TV shows, it could be anything from a TV show that is not fantasy or science fiction or is no way related to adventuring, right? It could be 30 Rock or Breaking Bad, right? Or it could be a traditional kind of adventure movie like Indiana Jones, right? Who are your things that you like and identify with and you think you might enjoy playing, right? And so you say, okay, and let's think about how that sort of role interacts with the world. So I think tier 1, a stereotype.
Oh, hang on. Sorry. Pause for a sec. Sorry. Napoleon, you all right? Caught in his throat. You all better? You all better? Okay, I think we're good. All right.
Napoleon has bravely fought through centuries of inbreeding to survive another day.
He's a powerful creature of surviving genetic adversity.
So that's tier 1. Tier 2 is you take this stereotype, and I'm very happy if even myself or my players can get to tier 2, is you take this stereotype and you add some kind of twist to it. So this is something that really makes a character feel like your own. So what's another stereotype from fiction that you enjoy, Rob?
Well, right. So you mentioned
stereotype it with a twist.
You mentioned Han Solo, which is a great place to start for any character. So he's a rogue, and he's dashing, and he's handsome, and he's clever, and he pretends like he's just out for himself, but really on the inside he's a good guy. That's a stereotype. That's a good place to start,
right?
For any rogue or really any sort of character.
So a stereotype with a twist in this case could be, so if you take the stereotypical dashing rogue, right, buckler of swash, if I wanted to add that with a twist, I would say, yeah, okay, your character's in fact a charming swashbuckler. The twist is that they've actually assumed this identity Don Draper style. That this character is in fact has another side to them where they used to be a boring shithead who's maybe competent at things but definitely couldn't charm or dash at all.
That's a great one.
So take an opposite of something. Another example is so one of my more recent characters is a witch hunter and an artifact finder, right? Definitely an Indiana Jones or the Last Witch Hunter. He'll solve your magical problems, but he's in fact instead of being cool and having a gravelly voice like Vin Diesel, he's an Italian wise guy from the South Shore of Waterdeep, who basically used to hunt witches for the mob or decurse magical items for the local mafia. And so there you add on to that all kinds of mafia-isms, and there you've got a very unique character who I can guarantee that everyone else in that session will remember, this sort of Vinny and all of his sleeps with the fishes types expressions.
So you want to think about, so we're talking about specific characters, but these are also archetypes. So you can start with an archetype like a mentor or a teacher, like your Gandalf, your Obi-Wan Kenobi. So you're a wizard, or you're a bard, or something like that. Something with knowledge, something with wisdom, something with age. But let's say that, you aren't really in the mentoring business anymore because, your last protege suffered a horrible accident at your hands, and maybe you drink a little bit too much now, and you want to try to do good because that's in your heart, but you don't want to get too close to anybody. And then you have, a little twist, a little bit of challenge, a reason to try to prove yourself, but more than just, I'm Obi-Wan Kenobi, and I'm inscrutable and wise. You can take a little twist and, add a little depth to your character. So you start with something familiar, and you just add just one small thing.
Step into the spotlight.
So I think we've covered the first 3-ish tiers of Matt's guide to character depth and creation at the very beginning of a game. 0, just stats and race and class. 1, picking a broad stereotype or sort of ideal from fiction that you're familiar with. Tier 2, take that stereotype and add a little something extra, add some kind of twist, like a wizard who's actually who sounds like he's from The Sopranos. Tier 3 is, I think, as far as I can go with character creation. Tier 3 is where you come up with something very incredibly new.
And this is obviously extremely hard to do, and if your players can do it, you should give them massive kudos, because it is pretty hard to come up with a truly original character. And if you can, it would be challenging to integrate that into a D&D game. Matt, can you think of any like truly unique characters from recent fiction as sort of an example of somebody who breaks with all of the molds?
Yeah, I mean, the only one from a book I read recently, and a book that we'll have to talk about on the show, is the character Baru Cormorant from the trader Baru Cormorant. A great fantasy book. I don't know if it won all the awards, but it deserves to win all the awards.
It did win some awards. It was a very well-received book.
Yes. The character it subverts... it not only takes stereotypes and subverts them, the character also has an immensely, much of the book is devoted to this character's immense, rich inner life that proves that she is very real, but it's also subverting stereotypes about colonialism and the colonized person, about gay and lesbian characters in fiction, and on top of that, it's a funny, interesting character who has a huge moral dilemma placed in front of them. Without spoiling the book, this is one of the ways you can create a very new character, is to give them a goal, but instead of one goal like a charming rogue with a heart of gold, which is I want to become a better person, or is to give them two conflicting goals that are equally appealing. I think this book does that very well. And if you made this type of character, you would definitely be on the top of a list of ultimate characters in all my campaigns.
And the other interesting thing about Baru Cormorant is that she's an accountant, basically.
Right.
Right. That's her area of competence. Is that she's very good
economics.
With economics, and somehow the author makes this. She's also competent in other areas, just generally very smart and clever. But her area of exerting pressure on the story is through currency manipulation.
Right,
and it's
currency manipulation, and like logistical warfare, like wars of attrition and things like that.
Right.
It's such a good book.
The one that I'm thinking of is from the Throne of the Crescent Moon by Saladin Ahmed.
Yeah.
Dr. Adula Maksud
Saladin, listen to our podcast.
Listen to our
please.
podcast.
I
Saladin,
follow
we
you on
love
Twitter.
We're such big fans. I'm probably saying the name wrong, but he's the main character, and he's a portly and kind of lazy aging ghoul hunter who would rather just sip tea and relax in a cafe, but he gets drawn into these events, and he just wants to marry his fat mistress who he loves, and it's just such a terrific, unique character who has every reason to be in combat and fight and, you know, be an adventurer, but it defies in every other way what you would expect an adventurer to be like.
Yeah, so there are really unique characters out there, and if you have a character, you know, a player who comes to you and is like, you know, it wants to be something, you know, very crazy, I'm always encouraging that, like, you know, if I want to be a magical awakened dog instead of a person or something like that, yeah, you can go with that. So it's really hard to create a truly unique character.
One of my players went from playing a, you know, brooding elf warlock to challenging himself. He made a portly chef who is a cleric of trickery. And has been
just gonna water down this wine
just to
a
water
little
down
bit,
this wine a little bit with some.
Put some fantasy MSG
It's not
in this
poison.
food.
It's not poison at all. No, he's great, and it's you know, he said, I'm gonna do something a little bit different. I'm not gonna steal the spotlight so much, and it's been fun, and it's been interesting, and it's been a great point of entry for me to build on the world and have his character interact with people, which is one of the great things that an interesting character will allow you to do as a DM.
Here's the thing about DM Matt's authentic guide to character creation tiers is in that in Dungeons and Dragons or any role-playing game, the goal is not to create a character that has already had their story been told, right? Some players will want to write you a background where they've already had like this huge story arc because they love writing and they love writing this kind of fiction or something that's told this interesting story of a character. But the idea of a role-playing game at its essence is that you're telling a story together, and so that the most interesting part of that character story needs to be told. So that's why moving characters from tier 0, stats, and a race and class combo to tier 1 or tier 2 is more than enough for you as a DM. Because if they have a broad stereotype of how a character might view the world, or what their goals are, or how they act like, or how they sound like, or even a stereotype that's maybe a little more refined or more interesting, tier 2, that's enough, right, to be an interesting character in a Dungeons & Dragons game, because their story and what their character is will change as you play the game. So getting them to those first 2 tiers is enough to create an interesting story.
So yeah, that's really all there is to it.
I think we should end with what should you avoid?
Oh, that's a great point. What should you avoid? Drizzt clones. I had a player come to me recently and say, hey, have you ever heard of Drizzt Do'Urden? And I said, yes, I have. No, your elf cannot be like him.
Yeah.
That's a major pitfall that you should avoid.
One of the problems with my guide and tier system and looking to other forms of fiction for inspiration is that if you start your campaign at first level, and even with 5th edition at 10th or 12th level, characters don't succeed. You know, they might succeed most of the time, but they don't succeed nearly all the time. So it's important to remind characters that if your character stereotype is that this person excels at everything, or they never fail, or I always get my guy, I never miss a shot kind of character, that just doesn't work in this type of game. It might be more applicable to other systems, but in
there are other settings
Dungeons
and
Dragons,
systems where that's a great way to start, but for D&D,
right,
it's not.
You've got to create a character who is in some ways ready to accept failure and accept that character's death. So creating a character that never fails is just the one kind of big no-no, I think, for me.
The other major pitfall, and you will encounter this in almost every game, I've had this problem with every group, even the very best groups, is the loner, or the antisocial type, or the brooding anti-hero. Everybody wants to play one, everyone wants to be dark and grim, and they want to be Batman. And that's fine. Batman was on a team. Batman's part of the Justice League. I already forget. It's the Justice League.
One of those.
One of those
Justice
teams.
League.
He's not a superhero team, but the point is that you can't have Frank Castle, for example. You can't have a complete antisocial, brooding hero who can't work with others. Everybody's character has to have a reason to be a part of a team. There are tons of reasons. Could be greed, could be lust for power, could be self-preservation. It doesn't have to be, I want to make friends. Your player doesn't have to be there to make friends, but they have to have a reason.
I'm not here to make friends.
I'm not here to make friends.
I didn't come here to make friends. I'm not here to make friends.
I'm not here to make friends. I'm not here to make friends.
I ain't here to make no friends.
I'm not here to make friends.
I'm not here to make friends.
Ooh,
they have to have
we gotta
a reason
save
to...
that for our next episode. Like the beginning of your campaign is you're all on a reality TV show together,
and the person who says "I'm not here to make friends" gets kicked off the island.
Immediately killed.
So
it's a good strategy, though.
So I actually don't provide a lot of guidelines for my players when I'm having them make characters, but the one that I do, I always say, why does your character want to be a part of a team?
Right. One of the things you can do for yourself is to give your players some questions that their character must be able to answer, right? And for all campaigns, I think, why do I want to be a part of a team is one of those questions, right? And other ones might be more specific to your plot, like, why do I want to stop the undead encroaching the city? Or why do I want to overthrow the corrupt mayoral candidate who's about to win election, or something like that. The final thing I'd say, if you're the dungeon master or game master in this, is think about your different types of players, right? Some players are going to come to you ahead of time and have already bought the books on their own and already know exactly what type of class they're going to play and what their character is going to be like. Some players are going to come ahead of time and have that 10-page backstory written, right? And then some players are just going to show up at the game time and need lots of guidance. So the last thing is consider what types of people you're going to have in your group and be ready to accommodate each of those types of people in helping them make a character that's interesting. Because each of those types of people, the person who knows exactly what feats they're going to take at level 20, the person who wrote a 20-page character backstory, and the person that just shows up, they all probably still need help making an interesting character, right? So asking those questions like, how does your character speak, right? Do they use big words or small words? How do they approach the world? Like, how can you best describe them? What sort of actor or actress would play this character, right? Those are essential for every one of those players, and decide where you want to spend your time as you help them make players.
And one thing that we'll talk about more, and that Matt and I both agree on, and that we'll harp on repeatedly, is that a big part, maybe even the most important part of DMing and running a good game, is knowing your characters and working on creating a good group environment and good group cohesion. But I think,
hell yeah,
ladies and gentlemen,
now we're done.
Adventurers, friends, thank you for listening in to a special late night edition of Dungeon Master of None. And we will see you next time.
Am I wrong? 'Cause I wanna get it on till I die. Am I wrong? 'Cause I wanna get it on till I die. Get it on till I die. Get it on till I die. Y'all remember me?
I like the way you die, boy.
Am I wrong? 'Cause I wanna get it on till I die. Am I wrong? 'Cause I wanna get it on till I die. Get it on till I die. Get it on.